Good afternoon, everybody. What day is it today? Wednesday. Happy Wednesday. It's so great to see all of you. I know I was live on Facebook yesterday, live again today. So you're seeing lots of me this week. But I'm so delighted to bring today on to the In Her Financial Shoes podcast. We're currently streaming this across all of our channels because it's such an important subject and one that's really close to my heart. And let me put a bit of context behind this conversation today. So this is all about the signs of financial abuse. Now, the reason that, first of all, this plays a really important part in my life is not because I've been in a financial abusive relationship, far from it. But a lot of the ladies that I work with and a lot of the financial planners that I work with in my training program, there are often very obvious red flag signs that financial abuse is happening or has happened. And I think when I think about financial trauma, for me, there's big traumas and little traumas that happen in people's lives. You know, there's things like divorce, separation, the loss of a loved one, COVID-19, for example, all of these things that can create anxiety and that can rock our well-being. Now, financial abuse is one of those really important subjects that I just really wanted to understand more about so that I could play a key part in understanding how can I help people who are in a financial abusive relationship, or how can I help people to support them when they have been through a prior abusive relationship. And this is very interconnected with domestic abuse. And this is part of the passion project, if you like, that as a business we want to support this year. We're going out to Necker Island in September, and I want to be in a position where I'm hot seating with Richard Branson talking about how can we change some of the poverty, anxiety, financial abuse that's going on in the world. So it's a real passion project for me. And what happened was last year I was Googling financial abuse and I came up with this certification program called a certified financial abuse specialist, and I'd never heard of it before. And then I saw that the person behind this brand was Little Miss Wow, who I'm going to introduce you to in seconds. And Michelle Hoskin has been in my world for a number of years. She works very closely with financial planners supporting their growth and their businesses. And she is the founder of Standards International. And Michelle and I met a few years ago, actually at a conference. And I sat there as a paraplanner at the time. So I was helping to support financial advisors with their report writing. And I was in this kind of real lost space of not really knowing what to do. And I just started my business and I started blogging about money. And I was in this real uncertain time in my life. And I remember vividly sitting in the audience, listening to Michelle on stage. And I just sat there the whole time nodding, going, oh my God, yes. And I literally found myself going straight over to her afterwards and just wanting to connect with her because she was so passionate about what she was talking about. So I'm so delighted to have you on the podcast today, Michelle, Little Miss Wow.
I'm delighted to be here. It's quite nice to be inside the In Her Financial Shoes world as opposed to watching it from the channels of social media. So I'm delighted. Super happy to be here.
Oh, thank you. And apologies for the long intro there, but I wanted to kind of put some context really behind why is it I'm talking about financial abuse and why did I take your certification program? But really for me today, I just wanted to bring some awareness to this important subject. And so I kind of wanted to start off by understanding and talking about what is financial abuse, Michelle? What does that actually mean?
Okay, so I mean, the reality is we could talk for hours and hours and hours and hours about it, right? But in simple terms, we all know that money is a hugely powerful thing, right? It's an enabler. It enables people to live wonderful lives, do amazing things when we're allowed out of our homes, etc. But it's a huge enabler. But it's also, when it's being used in a negative context, it's a huge disabler. And effectively, financial abuse sits in the realm of coercive control, which is ultimately using money and using finances, or the lack of, or the access to, as a means of control. And the abuse part of it is obviously when it's used in a negative context. So the financial abuse specialist, the course, the training is really has been created to alert people to the signs of and to help them understand. Because financial abuse, I can tell you, when we were creating this program, I literally for many times throughout the process sat, and it was almost like light bulbs were popping off in my head as to, oh my God, that happened to my grandma, and oh my God, my friend Samantha, that's happening to her. And literally, and it was an emotional wreck. I mean, you know, creating it, doing it as a certification process myself, because it's so real. It's so real. It's scarily so real.
And are there any kind of statistics around this? Like how many, I mean, is there certain types of people that are susceptible to abuse?
No, literally not. I mean, there is bags. I mean, you know, there's bags of stats. That one of the main drivers for me, and the stat that sort of triggered my interest initially, was that it's something ridiculous. This because I recite so many stats, I kind of get them all muddled up in the end. But it's like over 90% of domestic violence cases, there is evidence of financial abuse in it. So my logic was, well, if we're all more aware of financial abuse and how to spot it, particularly in our sector of financial services, it's likely that you're also going to uncover and bust domestic abuse. So it was almost like to kind of come to the rescue in its truest sense by, you know, but it's, the stats are off the scale. Like it's not, I mean, obviously in certain countries and in certain religions and in certain cultures, you know, money is used as a much more powerful tool than it is, say, you know, in the UK, for example, you know, where wealth is also attached to someone's credibility and someone's worth, you know, personal self-worth, not financial worth, but self-worth. You know, we're quite lucky here in the UK, but the stats are off scale. Like there's no race, no colour, you know, no gender. It's happening all over the place. And the difference with it, Catherine, is it can be so tiny, but it's still financial abuse. Financial abuse.
And we'll dig into this in today's episode in terms of what constitutes like an unhealthy relationship versus a healthy relationship, because I think there is a fine line to some degree, but then there's some really blindingly obvious signs of financial abuse. And I remember when I did the training program, there was a video in there that talked about, was it the Purple Purse? A US foundation that had created this awareness video, and I'll put a link to this actually in the show notes of the podcast, because it was so powerful. It was like a 3 or 4 minute video, and it was a lady who gets in a cab, and I think there was 2 people in the cab, and they see this handbag that somebody had left in the taxi, and then the phone kind of keeps beeping with text messages coming through, and the person in the cab kind of picked up this phone and started looking at these messages that were coming through from somebody, and it was a man in this particular situation, although it's not always the case, but it was a man kind of abusing this woman, saying you're not good enough to do this, and you know, just really attacking her self-worth. And the journey of this video was how then the phone then rang, and it was like, so they were trying to find the person whose handbag this belonged to, and they went to meet this woman in a coffee shop to give her handbag back. And it was almost like they were filming the reactions of the person who was obviously reading all this stuff and thinking, well, this isn't right, but what were they going to say to the victim?
Absolutely.
And it was so powerful, because I was like, actually, if I was in that situation, if I had a friend or if I had a client, what would I say to that person? How would I know that a financial abuse was going on? So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the really obvious red flags that we can be aware of, either within the financial planning community with clients or with just friends and family members.
Yeah. Okay. So first and foremost, I want us to just reflect on ourselves for a second. So we're all in relationships. We've got relationships with parents, with family members, with friends, with children. The thing I want to sort of alert everyone to is I want everyone to have a think about the language they use around money. So simple examples, little examples. You know, if you've got grown-up children who you give pocket money to, and you say, if you don't do your chores, you know, you're not going to get any pocket money this week, right? Well, what message, what language is being used there? What tone? So when we are all in relationships and we're talking about money, I think it's really important to listen to the tone of the language and the words used in relation to money. So I had a girlfriend come round for a coffee before, sort of in between lockdowns, and she said, you know, her husband had asked her why she shopped at Sainsbury's and not Aldi. And I was like, okay, tell me a bit more about that. Yeah. And he was looking at the receipts and he was saying, well, it's so and so this, and that's cheaper there, and X, Y, and Z. So I was sort of talking things through with her, but the distress just from a very happy relationship, the conversation around money, and what we basically stemmed it back to was he had the power over the money. He earned it, she did not. He was superior in the financial relationship, she was not. And he wasn't doing it on purpose. He was genuinely asking about, you know, why do you always buy the expensive stuff and not the cheap stuff, kind of conversation. But even still, like, it was still a conversation. So language, our language, how we use language, how people use language to us. I was in a relationship not so long ago where the guy didn't earn so much money, didn't earn huge amounts of money, but was spending my money like it was water. Oh, I've just ordered us a new this. Oh, I've just decided we're going to do that. Oh, I've just ordered us a new dishwasher. What? Well, he ain't got any money to buy it. So you've also got to look inwards and go, did that feel right? Was I consulted? Was it a joint conversation? Was it was that a mutual discussion, or was that the topics around money were being dictated to, were being withheld, or were being used to labour a certain point, or, well, you don't earn any money anyway, or you spend money like water, kind of conversations, right? So the obvious signs are that how we use words and how we are involved in conversations. The one that's probably not so obvious, and I want every person listening to keep a very close ear out when they're listening to their girlfriends and guy friends talking. I have a friend who will never, ever, ever buy clothes, shoes, bags, anything she needs, full price. Never. She never will. And I've had this problem with her for ages and ages and ages, because she deserves full price jeans and a full price coat. She'll go to the dodgy end of line sale rail. So actually, what she is realizing that she's doing is actually financially abusing herself by depriving herself of actually what she deserves. Now, they live in a £2 million house. Her husband has got several cars, but she will not buy full price clothes. Her children look like they've just walked down a catwalk. She will not. So actually, she is effectively self-sabotaging herself. And that is also a form of financial abuse.
Yeah, do you know, I'm so glad that you've mentioned that, because when I learned about that in the training program, I remember it being specifically headed and kept separate. And this is something that we talk about all the time in our content and in our programs, and because it's so important, because you're absolutely right. That self-sabotaging piece often just comes from our relationship with money, that we've grown up around. But if it continues into adulthood, you know, it keeps us stuck in this kind of scarcity mindset.
Absolutely.
Where everything is not enoughness. And when we don't feel good enough, we don't feel like we have enough. And we're always on this constant treadmill to have more and more of something. And so you're absolutely right, that internal abuse that we give ourselves because we don't feel like we deserve to spend money on ourselves, to have those designer clothes, to buy the more superior food, products, for example, in the supermarkets, all those kind of behaviors. So and the other thing I want to touch upon actually in terms of abuse is elderly abuse. This was something I didn't really think about. And I think particularly in the financial planning space, what kind of thing goes on around elderly financial abuse?
Well, it's horrific. I mean, in some cases, it can be the worst type. And that's because of how vulnerable the elderly person is. So, I think we are. There's a huge amount of vulnerability. So the position of vulnerability is extremely attached to financial abuse. So anybody that's vulnerable, and whether that be of decision making, of physical form, they're frail. There's like, oh my God, she don't know what she's saying. He's kind of lost his marbles a bit. Anyone that's vulnerable is why elder abuse is so rife. Now, the thing with elder abuse is it's sad because, you see it all on social media, and you've got this thing around, these elders, we should look after our elders. So there's this whole protective, but we also know that they're old, and they're old. So we almost dismiss them as a generation. It's shocking. And it shouldn't be so. So I think elder abuse is things like where you may see an elder person, or if you've got an elderly neighbour who is not keeping themselves clean, or doesn't look like they've got the money or the financial means to keep themselves in good food or take care of themselves. So as a sign looking in, so often elder abuse is presented in a deterioration in clothing, personal hygiene, where there's all of a sudden a family member or somebody who has popped up from nowhere, and you're looking at a neighbour going, well, I didn't know you had a niece, and all of a sudden the niece arrives, and or the nephew arrives, or whoever, and they're making decisions. And often where it's almost like when the elder person is treated like a child. So there's almost this interception of, oh no, we make the decisions for them. Almost like it goes back, like
decisions just because they're older.
Absolutely. They don't know what they're saying. They don't understand technology. So I'm going to the bank for them. Okay. And it's in the course, you'll remember, when there's stories, it was Deborah Kent that talked about some cases of elder abuse that she had experienced as a financial advisor. And it's heartbreaking. Because they're so vulnerable, and the pace of change in life with technology and such like, there is so many perfect opportunities for abuse to occur. I mean, my great auntie in York, she's 96 years old. She's got premium bonds, like going out of fashion. She's got thousands of them. She's been loaded. But the reality is, she's now got to. They're not going to pay her checks anymore. They're not going to send her checks. They're going to pay it into a bank account. She hasn't got a clue what she's doing, but she will not let go of control and let us help her because she's fearful. That's her money. So, even when they've had no reason at all to feel in any way in any danger or a victim of financial abuse, they're stubborn and they want to keep on to it. So it's a very, very sensitive area for sure. But it's just about being very aware as people, watching, questioning that thing that you see that's not right. Well, why is that? Why all of a sudden do we not see Brian anymore when we did see him every Friday? Where is he?
And that's one of the signs, isn't it? Is that isolation piece is often, and this is very prevalent also in narcissistic abuse, which can be very connected with financial abuse. We've had previous guests on. Actually, one of my best friends is a narcissistic abuse specialist, and she's incredible, and she herself has been through a narcissistic abuse and come out the other end. But one of the signs can be linked very much towards that control issue. And what happens is the victim can be made to feel like they're very isolated. So all of a sudden, one of the signs might be is that they have had lots of friends around them, but all of a sudden they don't want to talk, or they're not wanting to be part of that circle of friendship anymore, because they're made to feel like, well, you're not worthy to have friends around you. So that could be another red flag, can't it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think, I talk regularly about, the 5 ways of well-being, right? And I think one of the things that when I talk about that as a subject, we need to all be a bit more aware, and actually, rather than walking around with our heads in our mobile phones, if something doesn't feel right, ask that person, is everything okay today? Like, is everything okay? How are things going with your granddaughter? Or, if you ever want to talk, rather than going, it's none of my business, and be very British about it. Well, it's, stiff upper lip, it's nothing to do with me. Actually, I walked, after doing the financial abuse course myself, I was walking to the train station in Hitchin, and I walked past this girl, and I actually thought she was crying, and she was all kind of red-eyed. And I just said, I said, I hope you don't mind. I said, but are you okay? And she went, yeah, it's the bloody wind in my face, like it's making her eyes water. She's like, oh, no, but then she went, no, but and I was like, oh, wind, we had a joke about the weather, but I'm so glad I bloody asked, because if I hadn't, and she'd just, she'd been in a trauma, or I might have been the only person that spoke to her that day, regardless of what that trauma was.
So what kind of things, how do we approach this, what can be quite an awkward or uncomfortable situation?
Yeah. So, I mean, when you do become aware, you kind of worry less about how you ask. You just ask and worry about the consequences later, is what I find. So I think, one of the things that I would definitely say, if I saw you were in any distress, or if you were a friend or a neighbour, I would say, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay? Now, you can say, is everything okay in the general sense, or is everything okay with you today? So you literally bring it down to the moment. That's a very powerful thing to do, is to bring it down to, because if you said to me, are you okay? Of course I'm okay. There's people in worse situations than I am, but are you okay today? Well, actually, I'm not okay today. I'm not having a good day, for example. So it's I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you okay today? Okay. The other thing as well, that if you suspect there's something untoward going on, you can say, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but when Fred mentioned to you about the finances and nothing to do with you, I didn't feel very nice about that. How did that make you feel? So it's like you go to the subject, the thing that you saw, which was fact, like that's what Fred did say that to you, or whoever said that or did that. Then you bring it straight to yourself and say, and when I saw that, I felt quite sad for you. Nobody can argue with how you feel. You can't say to me, no, you did not feel like that. Yeah. Nobody can do that. No one can do that ever. And then you're saying, well, and how do you feel about that? Or you might say, does that happen often? Or, is this something that he does, all of the time, or she, or whoever? So it's almost like a deflect to the situation, what you saw, bring it back to how you felt, and then you push it to, and they might say, well, actually, I've never really thought about it. Actually, he does that a lot. And it might just be they've not even noticed, but now it might be, oh, no, I don't want to talk about it. Then there's a problem. Okay. And then the next bit of the conversation is, tell me more about that. I'm happy to listen without judgment. And this is when almost knowledge around mental health training really kicks in terms of positioning, wording, and but if in doubt, ask. No one's ever, I think it's Brené Brown, the empathy video, nothing ever bad happens showing an empathetic response. Never. They can slash you down and say it's nothing to do with you. You can say, okay, but I was just checking, I'm genuinely concerned. If you ever want to talk about it, I'm always here. My door is always open. We can always chat.
And one of the ladies in my community is listening to this at the moment and has asked, would that not make them shut off even more?
Depends. It depends. It might be, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But it's worth the try. It's got to be worth the try. The thing is people. We are very, we are British, right? And we are very kind of stiff upper lip, very reserved. And that's not everybody, of course. And we do have this, it's none of my business thing. Well, we don't want to, we don't want to pry. It's none of our business. But you know what? That question might be the only time I've ever been asked, because we think that no one's interested or no one really cares. It could save a life. I mean, it's quite simple. If it makes them shut off and there's an obvious, almost, you have to remember that the every aspect of our bodies, right? And this is probably more of a mental health thing than it is financial abuse, but every aspect of our physical body is attached to our brain. So when our brain thinks it, our bodies will react physically, and that's what everyone can see. So even if someone does that, or someone, or changes the context of their face, that's the physical reaction to the question. So if you spot that someone goes, no, this, totally shuts down, you can say, I can see this is quite a difficult thing for you to talk about. given, you know, your reaction just there, if you ever want to talk about it or say, well, you know, would you like to talk about that? They might say, no, it's not a problem. Are you sure it's not a problem? You'll know when to stop, Ryan. You'll know when to stop.
And I think also maybe pulling out some reference for them. So maybe using an example of somebody else.
Even if you make it up.
Yeah.
Even if you make it up, honestly. Yeah. You know, and then there are huge amounts of resources available, you know, online for victims of financial abuse. There is so much support, and it's becoming, you know, the awareness of it is significantly increasing. So I think, you know, if we all took a moment just to think about friendships, relationships, parents, grandparents, where money's been used as by way of control, and not always we'll all have a list. Like we'll have a list. It's just because it's, you know, it's there. It really is. And, you know, in the example I used about my auntie, you know, my mum will say to me, but we can't all go bullying in there, Michelle, telling her what to do. And I went, but mum, for her own benefit, she's not going to get any of her premium bonds if we don't get this sorted. But my mum's so concerned about abuse and overstepping the mark, she's doing nothing. Well, I think that's equally as bad.
And ignorance is worse, isn't it? Yeah. And the final thing I want to talk about as well is that two things actually. And I know this is kind of like, we could literally talk about this for hours. It's such a big subject, right? But what about somebody who may be listening to this and thinking, I actually am in that situation at the moment. What can I do to get help?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I can share some links and stuff, and you've also got access to links through the course of a number of highly confidential, extremely supportive sources of information for those that are suffering from financial abuse, coercive control. So we can share some links. So there's lots. I mean, you only have to Google it, like just stick financial abuse into Google, and there is just oodles and oodles of stuff. With the work we're doing with the certification, one of the reasons we set it up is because we want to create a directory of experts who have a specialism in handling cases and situations of where financial abuse is prevalent. And just to give that into some context, there's I can't tell you where it is because obviously the sensitivity of it, but there's a location close to me in Hertfordshire that is they've got like cabins, and they were offering them, you know, they're holiday cottages basically. And because of the severe increase in domestic abuse and kind of violence within families with sort of COVID and lockdown, they are literally opening all of their cabins out free to families that are fleeing domestic abuse.
Wow.
Okay. And I got introduced to them because one of their families has suffered very severely from financial abuse. And they've been introduced to me as a financial abuse specialist because I've also qualified as you have. And there's an introduction that's been done. Now, we need more of me. We need more people, regardless of their role, what they do, whether they're a financial planner, lawyer, accountant, or just some person that just wants to know how to do this and help. We want there to be this directory of experts, because it's all very well and good going online, but actually to have someone, you know, who's got a specialism, you know, that can sometimes be more preferable to other people. So, you know, there is oodles of support out there. The challenge is it depends how severe it is, because if it's really severe, there is no access to the internet. You know, web browsing is tracked, phone calls are tracked, and there was and we can share it on your channels. There's a particular number that if you just text it, somebody will phone you back with a withheld number on the mobile, and it's like an emergency kind of SOS type text number. There's incredible support, but you know, the thing I would say is nobody deserves to suffer at the hands of any abuse in any way, shape, or form. It's a control, and it's got to stop. You know, it's just got to stop. But it's been around forever, and it will probably continue to be around for decades yet. But this all helps. All this awareness, talking about it, education, it's all a step in the right direction.
And you're absolutely right. There's no particular person that's more susceptible. I mean, we've seen lots of cases of celebrities. I mean, Tina Turner, the Tina Turner film is a great film just to watch, to see that, you know, that coercive, controlling, narcissistic relationship there. And So there's lots of, it's not just the poor, it's not just the wealthy, and in some ways wealthy individuals can be more susceptible in some ways because it can be hidden better.
Absolutely. Well, because do you remember? Well, Catherine, do you remember from the training one of the quotes? I can't even remember who said it now on the training program, but she said effectively, they want what you've got.
Yeah.
That's it. And that line for me was it. That's exactly what the problem is. Often those that are abusing have less than what you have, and it could be less status, less money, less friends, less family. So therefore they want to remove you from your family circle. They want to extract your money for them. It's basically they want what you've got.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I thank you so much, Michelle, for your time. I'm sure we'll be back on this conversation again on another occasion. But thank you so much for just sharing some of those kind of the signs, the signals, what is financial abuse. And Emily's just shared here live on this video that just this discussion about raising awareness is the first step. The more we can raise awareness with this, the better. And Candice has also just shared here live with us that. As a children's lawyer, she's dealt with clients suffering domestic and financial abuse. She's been through it herself. I'm so sorry to hear that, Candice, and has expressed an interest. So we will share all the details of the training program itself in the show notes, and I'll drop some links into our social media channels for those of you watching live today as well. But thank you so much for your mission, your purpose around this subject, Michelle. I know you're very passionate about it, and I really value your time.
Together, pleasure, an absolute pleasure, Catherine, and keep up all the work you're doing. It's absolutely wonderful. And the more we talk, the more we'll get done. It's quite simple. So well done to you as well.
All together is better. Thanks so much, Michelle. Thank you for listening, guys, and we'll catch up with you again soon.